Yes, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I think there's a number of items that members have raised throughout the last 10 months, which we all need to consider when we moving forward beyond April. Also understand that the scrutiny working group of chairs and vice chairs met recently, so that will the results of that will come through in terms of future work programming as well. And I do understand that there's to be an all-member working group to be organised shortly, which will give the wider membership opportunity to put in ideas for scrutiny work programmes going forward. So we'll just have to watch that space.
Yeah, I think it's been good for the new members to learn about what's gone on previously, and a lot of the reports and the presentations have been really, really useful from your team, Neil. I think it's a real credit to the council that the office have gone into so much detail for us. Councillor Quinn?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. Just as a point, we did have that meeting, it was last week. Could I just ask that in future we could have a brief written summary of those proposals, just so councillors are aware, and just so we don't replicate things, because we could very well have people starting to say, oh, well, can we have this, can we have that? It would be a lot easier if we could see it beforehand or during the meeting. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, is Councillor Payne on? I don't know, because obviously he's chair of Corporate. I don't know, what do you think? I think it'd be useful, that, don't you think, Chris? I think it'd be really useful having that as part of the agenda pack.
Yes. I'll have a chat with Rachel about it.
And Anthony, did you want to come in as well?
Chair, just hopefully the work that yourself and the other chairs through the coordinating group should hopefully ensure that sort of any crossover or any items that just need to be worked on a little before it comes on the agenda. To be honest, that's where that should be happening, and hopefully with the work that's already been done on that and the work that will come through as part of the all member scrutiny workshop as agreed in sort of the scrutiny development plan, and that'll help to make sure we've got all items collected and we can get them planned out for what's left of the current municipal year and then for next year going forwards.
That's great. So I think we've got a good plan. I think we've got some good stuff on there. I think sometimes there's a fear of overloading a committee with work, and sometimes it has to be. Sometimes some agenda and have to be overloaded because of the fact that so much has come to fruition during the period between the previous meeting. But I do think having focused agendas has really improved the way we're operating and really means that we can drill down on things. So I think if everyone's happy with what's on the proposal, I think we'll just move to the tourism strategy. And Lorraine, I think it's the Lorraine show tonight, isn't it? You're going to be doing both presentations, aren't you?
That's correct, yes, Chair.
So I'll let you go straight on. And
on with the tourism strategy. So I'll share what we've done this evening is we did a briefing note. We've also done some slides. It's quite a visual topic, so we thought we'd do some slides to share as well, rather than.
You're very, very, very quiet, Lorraine.
Am I? I'll take my earphone. Help. Is that better?
Yes.
Much better, thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. I'll just put my volume up. So if I share my screen and then just let me know when you can see what's up on the screen. Has that come up now?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Brilliant. So this is the update on the tourism strategy, which was launched just about a year ago, I think, just around January, February time last year. So it's kind of the end of the first year and there's a lot that's happened and a lot that's still to happen. So we wanted to provide the committee with an update. It also provides some information and detail on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund activity that's there to support tourism and visitor economy. And we've also got some details on the local visitor economy partnership work that's also been taking place over the last few months that you might have seen or heard about. So we shall move on to the summary. So what we've got on the agenda in terms of this particular update, the strategy itself, some statistics, what we call the STEAM data. So we've got some data in there, some relatively recent statistics for 2022 on the tourism economy for our area, UKSPF and the LVEP as it's called. So just casting our minds back a little bit to the strategy itself and what the aim of the strategy really was a real desire to for the High Peak to be a place of strong character and defined by its geology, industry and its people, a place to explore and try new things. And effectively looking at being better connectivity, better connection and working together across the High Peak area with a focus on giving High Peak visitors what they're looking for. So as part of the strategy itself, there was a lot of consultation done around where there might be some opportunities, and the areas of opportunity that were identified by those consultees were around the distinctive nature of our towns and villages and how to really enhance that and showcase that. Overnight stays, the need to increase overnight stays, walking and cycling and the importance that the outdoors has to our area. And then finally, accommodation and improving the quality of accommodation. So what that led to in the strategy were 4 particular areas of opportunity and growth. So that towns and villages really around looking at that really unique and distinctive character of our communities and towns and villages, so that we can really, we've got a distinctive offer and that we can really showcase that and advertise that and give people reason to come to visit and to stay for longer. Cycling and walking, again, a real learning over the last few years is that following the pandemic, there's been a lot of big focus on being outdoors, people's health and well-being, and the kind of the positive impacts that can have. So again, making sure that in focusing on the cycling and walking, that actually we're looking at developing itineraries and really looking at developing more walks and circular walks for people at all levels. We've got some fabulous opportunities for some brilliant walks, and we just need to make sure that we can attract a range of different clients and customers and visitors. And again, it's about encouraging visitors to stay for longer, not just the day visitors. It's trying to convert those day visitors into overnight stays, because we know that has a significant impact in terms of spend locally. And that obviously supports our local towns, villages and businesses. And then another thing that's really, again, unique is to our area around creators and makers and lots of small independent businesses, and what that adds to those towns and villages and can be a real attraction for visitors is that independent community, and looking at having more events that support that. Whether it's local food and produce or local creative activity, and really showcasing some of the local products that we have. And then the final area of priority is around accommodation, and again really having a broad choice and variety and quality in terms of accommodation offers, making sure that there is something for every price point. And from the camping and the glamping all the way up to independent cottages, as well as kind of your bed and breakfast, your hotels, etc. So having that range of different accommodation and encouraging sort of new entrants into that, and more alternative forms of accommodation. So one of the things that was in the strategy was the setting up a tourism partnership forum, which would be made up of stakeholders and key organisations that would be involved in the visitor economy work of the High Peak, and they'd come together and really look at aligning priorities and really looking at the delivery of the strategy and looking at those 4 themes that we've just talked about and what things we can do to address those themes through the action plans, etc. So Councillor Greenhalgh would chair that forum, and the vice chair would be appointed once that forum is up and running. So it's expected that that would be in spring, and we've developed some terms of reference for that, and we'll be setting up a calendar of meetings for the year for that type of activity. So membership would include Derbyshire County Council, Visit Peak District and Derbyshire, Vision Buxton, Visit New Mills, Peak District National Park, Peak National Park Authority, etc. So there'd be a wide range of stakeholders involved in that. And some of the areas of focus, it really is more like cross-cutting and looking at the marketing, visitor management, in terms, making sure that there are opportunities for people to get to different tourism locations, or if they're going for a walk, that there's opportunities to get back to where they started from, if it's not a circular walk, things like that. And again, looking at business support and how we can support businesses and within the tourism industry to flourish and thrive, and any funding opportunities linked to that. So we shall move on to the data. So STEAM data, I'm not sure whether you've heard of STEAM data, but it stands for Scarborough Tourism Economic Activity Monitor. And it's basically national data that gets, it provides destinations with annual data on their tourism and visitor economy, and it relates to a variety of different measures, but most importantly, the ones that are most talked about are often visitor numbers, spend, overnight stays, employment within the tourism sector, and economic impact. So we've got some headline results. So the 2022 results have only just been published not long before Christmas. It was certainly November, I think, we might have received them. There hasn't been any STEAM data for a number of years because of COVID. So some of the comparisons on here relate to 2021, but there was certainly, I don't think that there weren't any results in 2020. So some of the comparisons go back to 2019, which was kind of the last year pre-COVID. So most destinations are comparing 2022 figures to 2019 to see has there been an improvement or a change. And so in terms of the economic impact of the visitor economy in the High Peak in 2022, it was £299 million, which is a 27% increase on 2021, which is obviously really positive. Number of visitors in 2022 were 4.66 million, which again is an increase on 2021, but it is actually a decrease when you compare it to the figures for 2019, the pre-pandemic year. Then in terms of jobs, there's been an increase in terms of both direct and indirect tourism jobs compared to 21 and 2019. But there has been we have noticed that there's been a drop in serviced accommodation bed spaces, but self-catering is maintaining bed space numbers. Again, some of that might be the impact of the pandemic, where actually some people, for a period of time, the only option was to be in self-catering accommodation, and because of the different lockdowns that we had, and when we were allowed to certainly socialise at certain times, it was in more independent accommodation. And then the average length of stay is 2 nights for serviced accommodation and 7 nights for non-service. So again, showing that in terms of 7 nights, if visitors are coming for 7 nights, then they're obviously spending money within the district or borough during all of that time that they're here. So again, it's important to really understand that and see how easy it would be or what we can do to increase those number of overnight stays and for longer periods. So in terms of the Shared Prosperity Fund, we did, through the funding, there was quite some significant sums that were allocated towards the tourism and visitor economy. So under a couple of different themes, we had campaigns to encourage people to visit, and also promotion of the visitor economy. So we've got Visit Peak District and Derbyshire were the successful contractor consultant who were appointed to deliver the outcomes and outputs that have been identified as part of the UK SPF investment plan. And the next couple of slides talk about some of the activity that's been taking place connected to that activity and some of the areas where businesses have been supported. So, for example, creators and makers, a number of local creators and makers were supported to attend a country fair last September. Again, that's that focus on one of those priority themes, and there's more activity planned to continue with that theme around Meet the Maker and having a food and drink event in the spring, which is looking at, developing a menu that would showcase local produce. It's a bit like along that totally locally theme where it's, I think produce is very locally sourced, very sustainable in that respect. Which again can be quite an important factor for some visitors. They really like to see things of that nature, and being able to and then develop, have a dinner where opportunities for businesses to network, themed around that local produce and a menu that's been designed and is very locally sourced. And also trying to develop an event for later in the year that would tie in with the Walk-in Festival in September. Again, building those relationships with creators and makers and linking together those different businesses, creators and makers with those tourism businesses, etc. So that's one of the areas where there's been quite a lot of activity. And then I did mention earlier about the cycling and walking festival. So there's a lot of preparation and discussions that have been happening. So Visit Peak District have been speaking to a wide range of stakeholders, including Walkers Welcome New Mills, Move More Glossop, Move More High Peak, the Buxton Town team, Vision Buxton, the Opera House, Chapel Parish Council, and they've been collating as part of those conversations walking and cycling content, and really understanding what opportunities there are to develop more walks and present them and kind of do local itineraries that can make it really easy for visitors to know what options there are, whether they're and what level of difficulty, whether they're great for families with young kids or more advanced walkers. And again, they've started to certainly plan around video content. It's not the best time of year to be doing that. They were waiting for Christmas to pass so that they weren't doing it with all the Christmas decorations, because that can date photos to a particular time of year, but really looking at planning the right content in terms of both photographic, video or drone footage, and also developing a consumer survey. Again, that will help to continue to shape those marketing plans for what visitors are looking for. So we do also have
Lorraine?
Yes.
I was just going to
Oh, sorry. I think it might be here. I'm just going to say that I attended an LVET meeting today, and they gave a further update with some of the.
Okay.
So you won't have them for the presentation. So I just thought I'd verbally say them as part of this campaign, because it's a significant campaign. All businesses, there's a toolkit going out to businesses from next month. So that's about readying and encouraging businesses to be walker friendly, cycling friendly, and then the launch around the Walking and Cycling Festival, which happens in September, but will start being promoted. And you'll see a lot more digital content as well as physical copy. The physical copy is going out in the summer, so just so you're aware, it goes under the Visit Peak District in Derbyshire, but it's High Peak. It says it's sort of step out, ride out in Derbyshire's High Peak. It's a High Peak focused campaign. But just for people, so it is about to kick off, and you should see it, and that includes, as Lorraine said, say loop walks around Chapel, and then there, in terms of cycling, it's not so much about loops, it's about types of cycling with your toddler, cycling, mountain biking, cycling around a reservoir, that type of very targeted stuff. So just thought I'd add that very topic off the front of the press info in as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that because this slide has got that visual saying ride out here, and I think the one before, if I just go back, one's got that step out as well, so that follows through. So yeah, there is quite a lot. I think it, because there's an acknowledgement that we've got a wealth of brilliant assets for that walking and cycling, as well as towns and villages, that actually there is a lot to do, that people can come and stay for a whole week, you know, and if it's a bad weather day, there's plenty to do within the towns and villages, and there's, you know, when the weather is great, it's brilliant to get out and do these outdoor options. And again, it's about having those options for different levels of ability and interest. So again, that getting active, that it's a great place to do that because of all the different options that we've got right on our doorstep. So that campaign is really, as Damien said, it's going to be sort of cranking up a gear and over the next as we go through the year, really, and certainly in the run up to that walking festival. So the next one, the timeline. So there's a couple of things on there that are happening at different stages in the year. So this does mention, I knew there was mention of it somewhere about toolkit that will be going out to businesses. So as Damien said, around, you know, if there is, if we're promoting walks and things that we can, that businesses can, to know that they're on those routes and they're available, whether it's, you know, cafes, etc., or, you know, pubs or accommodation. And then at the end, obviously culminating later in the year with the walking and cycling festival in September. So some real activity to lead up to and to kind of do that marketing throughout the year. And then in terms of monitoring, in terms of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we will be monitoring and getting a year-end report or campaign report that will look at, you know, some of the things around number of web hits and searches on the web and things like that, so we can really understand that level of reach of some of these campaigns. But as I'd mentioned before, there's the STEAM data that we have that will come out that we get each year, which again is looking at it's all destinations get the same degree of information, so it gives us an opportunity to compare ourselves with other places and to see how we're performing, and to see how we're performing against previous years. And then the other area of a focus around the monitoring is the mobile phone data, in terms of monitoring visitor numbers. So you can use mobile phone information to know where people have travelled from within, whether, you know, within the UK or internationally, where they've come from, how long they've stayed, and where they've gone to, and that data can be analysed in terms of like understanding kind of habits of tourists. So again, it's really helpful data and analysis that will help us to understand what things are most popular. But again, it's understanding, are we marketing the full range of things that are on offer, and understanding where people are wanting to go and visit. And then the LVEP, as it's shortened to, the Local Visitor Economy Partnership, is so Visit England approved, I think it was in November, certainly not long before Christmas, the Visit Peak District, Derbyshire and Derby to become an accredited Local Visitor Economy Partnership, and the LVEP. And this, it's a partnership, and it's brings together destination management organisations, but also district and borough councils, and it means that that group, effectively between the destination management organisations and councils, will work together collaboratively, locally and regionally, as well as nationally, on shared priorities. But the real focus of that is around growing the visitor economy, and really focusing on that destination management, stakeholder relationships, and planning, and that kind of bringing people together around a table, and it's kind of greater than the sum of its parts to get the real focus and impetus really on trying to make improvements in a variety of different areas. And hopefully that STEAM data will help with that, in terms of where can we focus our attentions, where we want to, is it the overnight stays and things like that, and where we can really look at how we can make those improvements, and increase the level of spend and stay. So Damien is a member of that board, and as he said, the meeting was held today, and a destination management plan will be developed by the LVEP, and that's certainly in development now to get that in motion. And the key focus around that is it would be in place to align with the election of a mayor, as part of the mayoral combined county authority. And for us, I think one of the key areas of focus is trying to link in our tourism strategy and the tourism partnership work into that work of the LVEP, and making sure that High Peak is really high up on the agenda, and really contributing to that, to the visitor economy. And then I think that's the last slide. So open to any questions. So I shall stop sharing my screen, and then I'll be able to see if anybody has their hands up, because currently I can't see. Oh, I think I have just seen a hand go up.
Yeah, I've got 4 hands up. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Jill Scott first.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Lorraine. This sounds really, really exciting, and I'm sure I'm going to be talking to Damien about it as well. Just a couple of things, if I may. I hope, and I'm sure you have, that you've looked at probably the most important event in history to do with walking, the Kindermas Trespass, because there's always an annual event to celebrate that, and that's around April the 24th, which is the date that it happened in 1932. It attracts kind of national interest, and I'm hoping that maybe you will have some sort of a stall there, because it seems like a really good, because it will have been launched in March before that. So I think it's really important to kind of look at the history of walking as well, and it's not something that is given to us by right. People have had to kind of campaign for it. So I think the Kindermas Trespass is really important, and there's obviously lots of walks, and that's a time that people do come and stay in the village. So just kind of making sure that the Kindermas Trespass is on the radar. It's a really important event, and like I said, attracts a lot of national interest. Another thing, particularly for a place like Hayfield, public transport links need to be improved. There's a statistic, I'm sure the Hope Valley people know this better, something like 90% of visitors to the Hope Valley came by car, and this has got a massive impact on some of our very small villages and towns. So there's got to be some kind of link with improving public transport and encouraging people to use it. I noticed Lyme Park, for example, have a special thing that if you don't come in a car, you get 10% off at the cafe. And, you know, just public transport is absolutely key. And I know the special buses that run in Castleton during the kind of peak visitor time, but it's really crucial that we look at public transport. And just a small thing, have we thought about involving the mountain rescue teams? Because, you know, they do such a great job, but I think also like safety in some of our more kind of challenging landscapes would be good, and it'd be fantastic for them to have some measure of publicity as well as the education side of it. So 3 things: kinder mass trespass, public transport and mountain rescue. But great, I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Lorraine.
I'm going to allow Lorraine, and I think Damien wants to respond as well.
I'll go first, Lane. I'd say mass trespass, absolutely. We can take that with Visit Peak District Derbyshire, make sure it's on the radar and for ourselves. Public transport is on the radar. It's probably dealt more at the Derbyshire, Derby, Peak District level. I said at the board today, it was clear that they did a new campaign around encouraging people to walk and visit Peak District and Derbyshire by train, and it's had one of the biggest reactions they've had on social media. They've had 11,000 new follows, etc. So there is an appetite for it, and actually High Peak and the Oak Valley in particular is pretty well connected for doing that, and loop walks. So, and that's why we're pushing that. I think the mountain rescue, I wouldn't imagine that's already on the radar, so I think it's a good suggestion, and we can feed it in and make sure it's taken into account. Similar with mass trespass, I don't know that it already isn't. If it's not, we'll make sure it is. I think.
I'd agree on the mountain rescue. I'd actually seen something recently where there had been a rescue that was required, and it's because I think that certainly in terms of safety is for people who are visiting the area might not realise how quickly the weather can change and how it can become can go from being quite a pleasant walk to potentially becoming quite dangerous because the weather conditions can change. And I'd seen something relatively recently where there had been a rescue that was required because of those circumstances. And again, I think it's that with people who aren't used to the area, and that the geology and the kind of the weather that can come in quite drastically, that's probably quite a good focus as well, to that kind of awareness raising around that. And knowing what to do if if something happens where you do need to get that help.
I think it's about education as well, isn't it, Lorraine and Jill? We had a presentation a few years ago from Glossop Mountain Rescue, and they had a regular group of young people with a leader all getting stuck, and there was about 3 or 4 times within about a 12 to 18 month period where they called out for the same people. So if we can educate people about safe walking and safe skills, it means that the mountain rescue team are then not going out and having to rescue people over and over again, and it makes it safer for people as well. So 100% agree.
And equipment, and just in terms of basic equipment and like the right clothes as well, and there's just things like that, and making sure that people are equipped when they go and realise the terrain that they're dealing with.
Just one thing, because it did come up again at the LVEP, is that is very true when it's hiking, but actually as part of the walking campaign, it's actually probably more targeted to the lower ability. And there's actually the joining up with I can't remember, it's like a social media type group of women that have got together to walk, and it's around, you don't need to buy the fancy shoes, but here are the places you can go. So it's like the reservoir, the Set Valley Trail, because all you need is a sturdy pair of trainers. You don't need the kit. And actually that fear sometimes of getting lost puts people off from visiting. So we've got to balance it about the right equipment for the right walk and those. So, but I totally take the point.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to bring in Councillor Quinn now, and then I'll bring in the other people who are waiting. So, Councillor Quinn.
Okay, thank you. I thought I'd have to wait a bit longer. I've got a few questions. I'll say what they are, and I've also got a comment. First of all, in terms of the data for tourism jobs, do we have figures as to how many of those jobs, if any, pay a wage that is sufficient to buy a house and keep a family within the local area? Because tourism jobs are notoriously low paid, and there are issues very well documented in areas like Cornwall, where people are really struggling to survive. There are a couple of links to that as well, but I'll come to those in a minute. Also, do we have data on the difference between tourist spend if they are in serviced accommodation or if they're in self-catering? Because I've also seen some indication that when people are in self-catering accommodation, they tend to spend a lot less in terms of the local economy because they buy their food, they quite often get a shop in, they're less likely to eat out, etc. And I presume, I mean, we do seem to have noted that hotels, B&Bs seem to be disappearing, and there are a lot of Airbnbs and holiday cottages. And the next point I'm going to pick up is the holiday cottage, the holiday lets, the Airbnbs. Now, the Buxton Advertiser in December of this year was writing about the Derbyshire Dales. They commissioned a report looking at housing needs and looking at the number of second homes and holiday accommodation with a view to using these new powers that may come out for charging double council tax. Now, the figures quoted in the Buxton Advertiser were about there being 970 second homes or holiday lets in the Derbyshire Dales. I think at another committee, we spoke about Buxton and the number of Airbnb listings being about 900. Now, the thrust of the article is the problem that Airbnb's holiday lets are causing for people in terms of accommodation. And I think we've got an issue, because I was hoping that we certainly would be acting on this and taking some measure about the number of Airbnbs and second homes and holiday cottages, and yet it seems we're going in entirely the other direction. I'd rather see us try to encourage serviced accommodation. So I am a bit concerned about where we're going with the tourism strategy. A big rant, but I'm hoping. So 2 questions about wage levels, about the difference in consumer spend between serviced and self-catering, and also a note of great concern about the move towards self-catering accommodation.
Shall I come in first, Lane? I think in terms of data, I'm not aware that it breaks it down to the level of individually knowing the pay. I think there's some data around levels of pay. I know, again, at the LVAT board, at that bigger area, there is about a need for more employment. There is actually vacancies within hospitality. The number of jobs are going up, but actually that there are more stable jobs and long-term careers, and there's a strong emphasis on this public-private partnership on encouraging long-term, high-paying hospitality jobs. That around that board, you've got the University of Derby, you've got other tertiary colleges around setting up the local population to be able to benefit from this. As you've heard, there's £300 million economy in High Peak. About a third of that is in Buxton alone. So there's £100 million to the local economy from tourism. So it's really important, but I totally take the point. It's the same about what we've done as the borough plan, that we want high paying jobs here in the High Peak so that people have a good quality of life. So there is a lot being done, but I would have to defer to Lorraine, and Lorraine, we may have to come back to you on the specifics of the data, but I don't think it draws down to that level. And I think there is some data. There may be some in the briefing, is there, Lorraine, around the difference between the spend for serviced and self-catering spend. I've certainly seen it. I can't recall if it's in the briefing.
I'm sure there'll be some data analysis that can be done on that. I know that the high level figures give number of bed spaces for the different types of accommodation. I think when we're talking about self-catering, when we're talking about diversifying the offer, certainly it was around bringing in new types of accommodation. So particularly around, there's been a real increase in demand for things like glamping, which actually can be quite expensive as a kind of accommodation compared to camping. But again, those types of accommodation and also maybe more boutique type hotels and more kind of independent style ones. But yeah, we can look at the data and try and see if there's spend attached to those.
And some of the priority was just about, we actually have almost accommodation black spots. So I know that one particular point was sort of in the chapel and wider area that there wasn't many accommodation, plus also in terms of hotels, there was only 2 larger hotels, the Travelodge in Gloucester and the I don't know if the Crescent now classifies. There's very specific classifications as to larger hotels. I can't remember the number of beds, but we for the size of population and the fact that the borough gets 50 million visitors a year, it was low for the number of larger hotels. But obviously we have a lot of smaller hotels, B&Bs, like B&Bs, not Airbnbs. So there is an awareness of that, but again, if the specific data stuff, it's probably best to come back to you with that instead of.
Yeah, and I think on the Airbnb accommodation, it is something that is becoming more of a conversation point in terms of the visitor economy, and a challenge for areas where you end up with potentially like ghost communities in the winter time, because accommodation is being used as Airbnbs. And I mean, certainly we'll explore with colleagues if there is anything that we can do. You'd mentioned, Councillor Quinn, about the planning opportunities through the planning process to look at second homes and whether we can apply increased council tax and things like that to help discourage it, whether there's anything that we can do through the planning process on that. Certainly we'll look into that further, because it looks like that might be a policy development area that we can look at.
Okay, thank you. I mean, and the glamping and the boutique hotels, I think that would be fantastic. It is the self-catering, the second homes, the holiday cottages that I do have some concerns about.
Just on second homes, we do have a policy of 300% local council tax. It's the short stay that is the loophole at the moment.
Yeah, we can't identify them. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think in the statistics, it hasn't shown an increase in self-catering accommodation. It's just that there's been a decrease in the serviced accommodation. So I think that's what, but again, we can look into that in a little bit more detail and see if we can understand the difference between the statistics and what specifically what type of accommodation that it is that's decreased, and scratch the surface a bit more.
Okay,
okay, thank you.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Evans now.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just firstly, an observation. I'm very pleased at some of the data that we've seen, particularly the increase of 4.5% economic impact on pre-pandemic levels, especially given the prevailing economic climate. I think that's a very good success story, and it's something that we must be very good to build on and continue to sort of to press this this is a destination of choice, as it were, for visitors, and this is a really encouraging piece of work. And so, thank you for the presentation and the longer briefing note. Just one quick observation and one quick question around the sort of step out initiatives. Damien may be aware that via Move More and Sally, we actually have a walkers forum, as it were, in New Mills, which is made up of all organisations who have an interest in the walking agenda around New Mills, including, Visit New Mills, Friends of New Mills stations, walkers are welcome, all of those kinds of things. We have a meeting coming up, in fact, next Monday, and I'm sure they would be keen to be as engaged as possible in all of the activity around this. And as a sort of an allied point to that, really, I've noted the forum that is due to be developed in the spring. The membership of the board is made up of the Borough Council, the County Council, Peak District and Derbyshire, National Park, Vision Buxton, Visit New Mills and Buxton and Elite College. I just wondered whether there was that was a core membership and you were seeking to then, dependent on whether the issues being discussed, to bring in ad hoc membership or experts and expert witnesses, because, I suspect, given the very hyper-local nature of some of the people on town and parish councils, that there may be knowledge and expertise in those areas that perhaps could be tapped as part of that wider sort of strategy development, really. Not necessarily something that people need to be involved in full time, but it's a plea really to make sure that any kind of ad hoc issues are cast the net as wide as possible for getting people involved.
Shall I go first, Lane? So
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
think great in terms of economic impact. It's anything upwards is good, particularly in the current climate. I think that's what we're seeing as well, in that there's a lot of day visitors. I was actually at the Pavilion Garden speaking with the general manager there, and the footfall recovery is fantastic, but the spend per visit is down. So where people would buy a lunch and a meal, people buying a brew and a biscuit and bringing the butties. So it's about trying to get, although the numbers is great, it's actually the spend, because it's the spend that improves people's lives here in High Peak. So totally get that. The step out, there has been engagement actually with the New Mills group. When it said Move More High Peak, that's the umbrella term, Move More New Mills, etc. So there has been engagement, and again, I think there's open to that as well going forward. And in terms of the tourism, with anything like this, you have to be a limit, and the logic to the membership was those with strategic influence and those where there is a specific destination local visitor. So you've got Visit New Mills, you've got Vision Buxton who do the Visit Buxton. So that was the rationale, but I don't see any objection as the chair, and I'm sure the forum members won't object to, depending on what the agenda is. We'd want to make sure that any sort of special interest, any special views are sort of taken into account. It seems common sense to me, so I think that's a good suggestion if there are topics or people that would like to come forward and contribute, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that could be accommodated as you say, if there was a special focus on a particular topic and needed to bring that specialism in as a kind of co-opted expertise on a particular topic for a certain period of time that the board identified, then I'm sure that again that could be accommodated.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor Evans. I'm going to bring Councillor Sizeland in now.
Oh, hiya. Yeah, I'm keen that we don't get missed out. Chapel doesn't get missed out of the tourist strategy this time. There's a couple of stumbling blocks. I mean, we do have a lot of visitors to Chapel, but there is a couple of stumbling blocks. One which you alluded to earlier, the lack of accommodation. We've got the King's Arms on the marketplace. That used to be brilliant. There's 16 rooms there, but they're just going derelict. I don't know what the man in charge there, the manager, is doing. I really don't, and that's a shame, because it's just deteriorating all the time and nothing's happening with it. The second point is the car parking. We're really struggling now for parking, because so many businesses and places have put the hour or 2 or 3 hours on So people, it's difficult. There aren't many places where people can stay all day. So, I mean, the obvious place is the Thornbrook car park to extend. That would help. It'd help businesses, but it'd also help tourism as well. So, yeah, that's just what I sort of wanted to say about it, really.
So I'd say you already heard even the walking and cycling is very clearly targeted to Chapel.
Yeah.
I think the lack of accommodation is acknowledged. I think in the case of that pub, we might be able, the regen service and ask Lorraine may be able to reach out to that owner just to understand what their motives are around it. That's exactly what the purpose of the regeneration team to do, to see if there may be particular circumstances. There's lots of reasons why sometimes things can't go ahead, but it probably be so if the team don't already have those details, if you could pass them to Lorraine, that'd be great, and we could do some outreach to the pub and just understand if they're, because obviously at the moment there are small micro grants and things that might be the difference between pushing them in the right direction, and parking.
Yeah.
Parking's an issue everywhere, and I think
I know that. Yeah.
And I think there's always that pressure between the all day and the fast turnover, and obviously on high streets, about keeping our high streets alive is obviously usually about a faster turnover. But I take the point about longer parking. I would say for the council to invest anything capital, the business case would have to stack up. So we know there's benefits to most things we do. It will be that our parking, we have to, it's the income we raise from it that pays for their upkeep and any further. So it'd have to make sense on that front. And I'm not off, we could look into that, but I'm not off the top of my head sure that would stack up at this point, but we could work towards it maybe. But that's just a off the cuff view from me, not anything worked out by officers.
Could we use any money from the UK Prosperity Fund? Could that go into it at all?
I'd have to I'll defer to Lorraine, but I doubt it because it's very specific, and the topic. So when you saw the presentation, the headings, we get some discretion in what we put it towards, but it's within quite a tight framework from government. But it doesn't mean to say there might not be other funds in the future, and there might be other things. So I think we're always looking for opportune things, and the team are developing a set of wish lists and things we want to do. That would be more assets than the regen team because it's car park, and there is obviously the assets review, so we could feed that into that process as well. But no, take the points as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, are you all right with that, Lorraine, in terms of the pub in Chapel? I think that would be just a good, just to see what the score is as well, I think.
I mean, I think from my understanding, it's somebody who has intended to invest in it and bring it back into use, but it just doesn't seem to be happening very quickly. But we can certainly make inquiries as to whether or not they need signposting for support, or whether there's anything that we've got up and running that would support them.
I've just seen a comment from Councillor Scott in the message, so I would say it's a catch-all to everyone. If there is a business or there's something that I would say email regeneration@highpeak.gov.uk, and the team will pick it up and can look at seeing if it's maybe we might be already known to the team, or it might be that they can do some follow-up and things. So anything you want to do, that's probably the best way for any councillor to raise things with the team. Just mindful you're going to get a million emails, right? That's what we do it to the service email.
Yeah, no, that would be because we could pick that up if we've got or particularly if there's contact details. Because as Damien said, we do have a variety of different funds as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The tourism element that was on the screen. The funding for that has been allocated because it's more about promotional marketing, developing those itineraries and things, whereas some of the other funding is connected to the high street and the vibrancy of town centres. So again, we can look at depending on the circumstances, if it fits into any of those particular funding pots, and the UK SPF team would be able to comment and signpost.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Kath. I've got 3 non-committee members waiting, but I'm gonna come to the committee members and let them speak first, and then I'll bring in any non-committee members at the end. So I'm going to bring Councillor Payne then Councillor Hackinen, and then Councillor Collins, Councillor Todd, and Councillor Hardy. I'll bring you in last.
Thanks, Ed. I do have a view on this, that I think we have to be realistic about some of the serviced accommodation that exists in the High Peak. So when I think about Buxton, when the Premier Inn opened, it gave families and people staying there certainty about what they were going to get. And as I understand it, its occupancy rates are pretty high. At the same time, we saw the hotel at the bottom of Burlington Road pretty much close. And I think if you asked anybody in Buxton, they would tell you that that hotel only survived because there was nowhere else to go. And once the Premier Inn opened, it started to decline in terms of numbers. And you've also got places like the Bedford that have been closed forever. So I do think there's a question, and it goes further than just the King's in Chapel, which was subject to another discussion we had recently, about the quality of what people coming to the High Peak want. And they don't want grubby, rubbish. They just want to know what they're going to get, where it's going to be, how it's going to look. And they really don't want to be dealing with Basil Fawlty. And I think part of the problem is that we have to accept that some of the serviced accommodation in Buxton, and I don't know wider, I'm sort of guessing that when the Premier Inn opened in Glossop, things changed as well. People just won't put up with average. And if you are average and you're on booking.com or you're on any of the other portals that you can buy accommodation from, your ratings will just go down the toilet pretty quickly. There are places that do pretty well, like the Queen's in Buxton. That's always full, and you wouldn't expect it to be because it's a pub. But I do think there's a reality that we have to look at, which is you can talk to the owner of the King's in, Chapel. You can talk to the owner of the hotel at the bottom of the Burlington Road. You can talk to all of these people. But unless they're willing to invest and unless they're willing to raise the quality of their product, they're just not going to get people in. And that worries me because it probably says, actually, some of these buildings, you just want to convert them into apartments and let people deal with them. And you want to attract in something like a Travelodge or more Premier Inns. It's a bit of a shame that that site in Chapel that's now got a whacking great petrol station on it didn't end up with a Travelodge or something. But the reality is people want to know what they're going to get. And a lot of the other providers, people who do Airbnb, they put a lot of effort into making sure that people know what they're going to get. And a lot of the places that have closed, it's shameful to say, but they were bang average or worse than bang average, and that's why they're not there anymore. And I don't actually understand how the council can help with that, because some of those owners don't really want to put the effort in. So maybe we should try and attract some other providers. That's sort of my point, really.
I think we'd agree with you in terms of the strategy. The strategy is to extend the range and quality, choice of quality. That is actually the aim in our tourism strategy. I think, as you've identified, the levers to do that are limited. We don't directly provide that accommodation, but we do have powers as a planning authority. We have our regeneration service. We have the links we have into the regional economic development, the D2N2 LEP, the LVEP Tourism Board, which is Visit England, which has, kite marks, accreditation. So there's lots of things that can be done to encourage accreditation and better quality. Like you say, you would think that market forces would force you to do that. I suspect that those business owners that don't increase the quality because they can't, as you say, the market leaves them behind and they go, and that's the market forces. But I can assure you that in terms of every lever indirect mainly, but that we will do to improve quality. In addition to that, we've got environmental services. if they're as bad as some of the ones you might be talking about, I don't know.
I certainly wasn't questioning, Damien, the effort that we put in, because I think we put a lot of effort in.
Yeah.
But I do think with some of these places in the borough plan, we need to just basically say, like, that's gone. That place that used to provide service is gone. So maybe we need to allocate other sites for, people who will provide a constant product, which is all people want. They just want to know what they're going to get.
I would say as well, I mean, we're on about regeneration and tourism here, but I suppose in terms of planning, it again, there's limited levers there. The council has to deal with the applications that come. The one you mentioned in Chapel, I believe that I was actually there at the committee. The Development Control Committee rejected that application, and it was overturned on appeal. So that again, it's not everything was within our control. It's through partnership work, and it's through persuasion rather than powers often that we try and achieve what we try and achieve. So
no, I guess it was that sense of reality I was trying to get to, Damien.
Okay.
That actually there are.
You just want to depress us all, Councillor Payne. That's what he did. Is that what it is? No. There's lots of optimism. It's definitely changing, as you've identified, though, isn't it? Though there is that changing.
Yeah, there is a change. But I don't know what you do to make people who have just lost interest become interested. That's the struggle. Anyway, that's it.
I think bottle it and sell it. I think you're going to
had one other thing. I did a Google search the other day for the top climbing destinations in the UK, and every time Peak District comes up as the top climbing destination in the UK. So I think that should be thought about as well.
Mm-hmm.
We do well on at the LVEP meeting today. They gave us some of the mobile data, and High Peak does very well on lots of things. The most popular town was Glossop. The most popular tourism experience was Hope Valley. That we're in some of the top paid attractions, including Tools. So we do very well, and these are quite national. This is national data, so we are punching above our weight, I think, on those metrics.
Cheers. Thanks for that, Councillor Payne. Councillor Hacking, and then I'm going to bring in the non-members.
Hello. I think you've just partly answered my question there, Damien, but I was just going to ask whether there was a breakdown of the figures for, like, who's coming for what activity. Are they coming for arts? Are they coming for the festivals? Are they coming for cultural activities? So that we can really look into what's popular and what footfall is and that sort of thing.
So Lorraine may know better, but a lot of the data that we have is for Derbyshire and Peak District. But we can, some of that, we can get down to High Peak level, but not all of it. So if there are specific things, we could probably get that to you thereafter, or share what information has been shared with us on the Derbyshire and Peak District. Given that a lot of the visits to Peak District and Derbyshire actually happen in High Peak, because we're a significant part of the towns in the abutting the area and stuff. Obviously, I know you've got data there as well. Don't know, Lorraine, if you know more on the data.
No, we can certainly look at that. I would expect the mobile data may well be able to identify locations of where people are going. So things like, are they, are they walking on the peaks? Are they within town centres? Are they visiting a particular museum? So I think the hopefully some of that data can be drilled down more as part of that work that we're doing, but we'll certainly ask that question if we can understand the kind of the themes of why people are coming to visit. Is it predominantly outdoors? Is it more cultural? Because certainly they can, I'm sure that's doable. The data will be there. It's just whether or not somebody can interrogate it in that little bit more detail.
Paige, you mute. You've been muted.
Oh, sorry. I have another question that relates to accessibility as well. I know that you're wanting to do walks for different levels of ability and stuff like that. But I was also wondering whether we could collect data on like whether that sort of intervention actually increases footfall. And one of the ideas I would like to put forward is an expansion of like quiet hours. And I know that the Crescent have done some quiet hours for the baths, and I was wondering whether how successful they have been, and whether it's a viable option to promote that as like packages, like quiet hours for other businesses. Really, I don't know whether that made sense.
Oh, Damien, you're on mute.
Probably a good thing. Can I just check when you said about the quiet hours? Are they times at the business it's focused for those that might be sensory overload for if you at busy times? So I know you get like autism friendly screenings at cinemas. Just to check that is on the same page. Okay. I don't know off the top of my head, and it's probably not something the council would be leading on, but we can certainly ask via Visit Peak District in Derbyshire, who we basically fund, and that's how we deliver part of our strategy is that working in that collective bigger partnership to see if there's any promotion they do to that because it's obviously must be a significant part of a small but significant part of the market. So we can ask the question. I don't think we've got a specific answer. I'm looking at Lorraine on that at the moment. Yeah.
No, but I think businesses or places sometimes do. Certainly, I think during COVID, there were times that they said what they used to promote sometimes where places have maybe come a lot better at saying here are our quieter times, and this is so that they would know that footfall and actually will then advertise and say these are the times that the business is most quiet, and actually then people would know that that's the best time to visit. So that's something again we can maybe promote with businesses that could be of interest if they've got that data. Certainly big supermarkets and big places do that quite a lot because they as a space can be quite overwhelming at the best of times when they're busy. And in terms of accessibility, I think as well, one of the things we've certainly talked about is walks and identifying walks that would be that are capable of accommodating, whether it's families with a pushchair, or whether it's people who've got either mobility scooters or a wheelchair, whether the terrain is acceptable. So maybe we certainly maybe need to look at that as part of developing some of those walks, of identifying again the level of difficulty and the level of accessibility and things like that, and facilities that are nearby in terms of whether it's toilet facilities, welfare type facilities, as well as kind of pit stops along the way that people can stop and have a rest and things like that. Okay.
Cheers, thanks. I know the Opera House they did an autism friendly and some sort of unfriendly productions for the Panto. Obviously that's one of the biggest draws for families into the Buxton area, and they've done some activities around that to try and make it as friendly and open as possible, which is really good. So obviously we encourage as many people as possible to do that. That's the way forward. Councillor Collins, you've waited very patiently. I'm going to bring you in now as a non-committee member. Thank you.
Yes. Well, it doesn't surprise me that the Hope Valley is the most popular tourist destination in the country. We get frequent, impossible to resolve issues about basically too many people, very often people not spending. So be careful what you wish for. But more concretely, in fact, there are so many people that I've talked several times this week to an owner of one of the caverns, which are unique in the world, Blue John Caverns. So, yeah, saying that in fact they are afraid that their business will go down because it's so difficult to actually get to because all the cars parked. So someone's already mentioned parking. Rachel Quinn mentioned holiday homes, again in Castleton, at least a third not lived in by local people, either Airbnbs, second homes, holiday lets. So I mean, there are some positive things which could help a bit with this, not that much, but in Lorraine's presentation, so promoting other places. I mean, wonderful if people would go and walk in Chapel instead of trampling all over Kinder Scout. If there are any other climbing destinations, you know, Charlotte has had complaints about Stanage over the weekend. So, you know, yeah, I suppose the message is partly dispersal, although we don't want other communities to be completely overwhelmed, and also communication. I mean, the fact that there aren't parking places, that you ought to keep to footpaths. So I suppose it's, you know, they're sort of specific items of communication, but I think really what I would plea for is that the different forums where tourism is discussed take into account the negative impacts, and that some sorts of tourism, if you drive here for the day, which is what the vast majority of people do in the Hope Valley, and go for a little walk, you don't spend anything. You just upset local people, which, you know, I don't want to be NIMBY-ish. I think there are some wonderful things that have happened recently, like far more ethnic diversity. But
I think what you're saying is recognised in lots of places. Today at the Peak District, Derbyshire and Derby board, it was again mentioned about the sustainability of it, that it's not just about numbers, and that's why there is a big push on getting people out of cars to visit the Peak District from both local authorities, the marketing board, and that's why again there's been that focus, particularly in the Hope Valley. It's very well connected by train. I know there are seasonal buses, there are other things, but and this I know that
I have to say, forget the seasonal bus. Yeah. Somebody in Castleton told me the most people they'd ever seen on it was 4. You know, we need regular, predictable public transport.
I would agree wholeheartedly. And there are some glimmers that potentially, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but the new regional structure coming in may see improvement in that. So, and at very least, better joined up conversations with the South Yorkshire mayoral area, in your case, in Hope Valley, and probably more the Greater Manchester on the other side of the borough. So there is some hope there. But I would say everything you've mentioned, holiday homes definitely known, with everything that can be done in terms of that percent council tax. But I think that isn't a barrier to the people who are probably purchasing those homes. Parking, I know that it's more of a on-streets county council, and I think there has been some enforcement there, but that itself can cause issues, like you say, that balance between what business needs to survive, but also residents need to be able to go about the business as well. But so I'm not saying it's easy, but I would say everything you've raised is definitely known at regional strategic level. It's known in High Peak, and in the forums would definitely take it forward and try and balance everything. Absolutely.
Yeah, but Damien, do you mind if at some point we have a conversation about this, because it is getting desperate in many ways?
Anytime, yeah, happy to.
Great,
yeah.
Good. I'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Todd, and then last but not least, Councillor Hardy, unless anyone else puts a hand up between now and then.
Well, yeah, sorry. Talking about sustainable transport, Buxton Town team has been for the last year or so trying to get the lightweight rail link, a pilot from Buxton Station to Blackwell Mill, where the Monsell Trail starts. They've run into a problem with funding, and I'm wondering if they can get a couple of perhaps areas from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, because there's as well as tourism, there's a decarbonisation part of it as well, I think. So I don't know whether
my gut feeling is there probably won't be the funds, but Lorraine may know on that. We obviously had it's 2.9.
Mark Brians knows a lot about it. If you wanted some.
Yeah, Mark's been liaising with them because I think they were preparing a bid that they were due to submit in January, but I think it's transpired that they wouldn't be able to submit it. I'm not sure whether that was because of the parameters of the bid, but certainly Mark's in touch with them. They were developing a bid, but I'm not sure whether it's still progressing, but we are in touch with them on that and supporting them.
Okay, thank you. That's all I really wanted to say.
That's great. Thanks, Councillor Todd. I'm going to bring in Councillor Hardy.
Thanks, Chair. Just very quickly, I won't ramble on at all. It's just a couple of things that this probably will help Councillor Quinn. I think that, as you know, I'm on development control, and I do feel that when anything comes up with holiday homes, new holiday homes being built, not holiday lets, and glamping sites, camping sites, they always seem to be refused, or very quickly refused, or the majority are refused. And I do think we should relax it a little bit and look into it even more, because I do feel that new accommodation, as opposed to Airbnbs in existing homes, will be a lot more beneficial to Glossop and the rest of the High Peak. And also, I think that it's nice to know that Glossop's on the map. And obviously, we've got the Market Hall, the new Market Hall being opened hopefully this year. With no tourist information in Glossop, would any of the funding be able to be put into a unit in the arcade or in the Market Hall to tourist information? If it's going to be open a lot more than the old market was, then surely that would help with people staying in the town, and they may stay even longer if they know what's there. And that's my 2 points. Thank you.
I think the first one probably more of a comment, but I think you're right that generally we need them more. But obviously, planning control, you've got to judge each application on your own merits, knowing the planning policy that you sort of advise. So obviously, we can encourage on a strategic planning level, but it's up to the Development Control Committee what they think is right and wrong with them. I think the tourist information, I would say, happy to look at anything and everything. I know we had some basic information in the municipal buildings, but I would say that the tourist information centres, unless there's a very high footfall and they tend to have either other funding from business partners or others, I find it very difficult to survive. We obviously have one in Buxton, and you may remember that that's now run by the Crescent Trust, but with a tapering support from the council. I can't foresee, unless there's a big change in the funding landscape for local government, that we'd be in a position to open sort of a staffed tourism information centre. I would also say there's been a big shift, as we're talking about mobile data, is how people access that information. It's far more important. I think, again, this board, or was it today, was saying about the biggest thing that Visit Peak District NAB should do is to make sure that they're consistently in the top 5 rankings on Google, because they're saying all their research shows if you say eating out in Glossop, walk in Glossop, if their website isn't hitting that top 5, people don't bother going onto the second page. And that's how a lot of people, I appreciate that some people that won't be, but increasingly people's, the, what do they call it, like digital skills and digital native is. So I think in terms of when we've got limited resources, we have to think, where do we put them? I'm not saying that there wouldn't be, I think it's a good, Glossop Halls would be a good place to put information, but I don't think it will be a staffed tourism information centre as you think a bit of old. I don't think there's many councils other than in particular sort of high volume tourist towns that can still fund them, or unless they've got into some sort of partnership with another organisation.
Yeah, I do understand that. I mean, I was just thinking, I've spoken to Bradbury House and they would be happy to put something in there for you. With walks, with maps of local walks and things like that. And I thought that might be an opportunity in the Market Hall. just with
Yeah,
maps in the
absolutely.
stand, but the local walks.
Yeah, well, in addition to the things we're working on, there's like the Move More Glossop, who designed the walks and local bus routes and other things. So I think they're always looking for a community space. But I could foresee absolutely the town hall, Market Hall, town hall being a place for that type of information. I think it's in people's business interest to do that as well. So
yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for letting me speak.
One final point that I was going to make is that we've got so many different events and niche events that go on in the whole of the borough. Do we have one collective database as to where, or online forum where all these things are going on, like a calendar of events, so people know what's going on, where it's going on, and when it's going on? Because obviously I've got my heritage, not my heritage, but the Heritage Weekend I'm involved in Glossop. That's the end of May. That could be publicised on it. You've got the carnivals in Buxton, Chapel, Whaley Bridge, New Mills, everywhere else, and Hayfield as well, Hayfield Carnival and May Queen. You've got that as well. So there's lots of different events that could be centred in one different area, and if it could be on one website and then linked together and at the top of Google, then people know what's going on. So if you want to search what's going on in the High Peak, then it gives you a list of what's going on where, and that may bring footfall. I mean, the event I'm running is like a 3-day event, so people may want to stay for a couple of nights and get involved with it and have a really good time with the free entertainment that's there. So it's similar to in the other areas as well, what's going on. If we could get it all linked into one central database, which could be searched online, it'd be useful.
So the short answer is no. The longer answer is the Visit Peak District Derbyshire does have an events space where you can search by activity or date, but I don't think there'll ever be one place. I think it's that there's so many areas of public life and other things where you want to put it all in one place, but it's keeping it up to date. So the short answer is no, but there are different things, both sort of council partnership connected and then just people who just do things, as well as like the community. I forgot what it's called. There's one in Glossop, but there's one in most areas of High Peak where it comes through the door and it's got local advertising and it tells you what's coming up in there for the next month or 2 or 3 months. But so there's a whole variety of things, but no, there isn't one, and I don't think it's feasible probably to create that, because it's a lot of either creating the database or the structure for it, as well as maintain it, making sure it's up to date and reliable. But if you go on the Visit Peak District in Derbyshire, at the very top there's a what's on, and you can look at all the events there. They tend to be bigger things, so they tend to be like Glossfest, or there's like Walking Festival, there'd be like the Buxton International Festival, there would be a run challenge, there's like things at Chatsworth, it tends to be quite formal, organised, rather than maybe lower level community things.
Yeah, just an idea of trying to obviously attract people in, but hopefully they'll get seen in the area and with social media. So yeah, thanks. A really, really lively debate there. Some really good points and a really, really good presentation as always, Lorraine. So thank you for that. If everyone is happy, I am going to move on to the next agenda item, which is Lorraine again, which is Revitalising Buxton presentation. So I'll let you go ahead with that and get your presentation up, and then we will have a look at that, and then questions will follow after the presentation.
Yeah. So I shall share my screen now, and hopefully you'll see the presentation come up. Let me just see, it should be coming now. Can you see that?
Yep, thank you.
It's on my screen. So this is a standing item to do an update on the Revitalising Buxton. So this time we've got a particular focus on 2 areas in particular: community consultation and stakeholder engagement strategy. And we've got some slides to introduce that, and then just an update. Last time we did quite a detailed presentation on the process we'd been through in terms of how we got to in terms of identifying how we'd move forward, and we talked about getting a development partner on board. So we'll talk a little bit about how that approach will work and what's going to be happening imminently. on that. So in terms of community consultation and engagement strategy, this is a document that we've been working on that will look at and cover how the council will involve residents and local stakeholders and empower them to get involved in terms of shaping this project within the town centre of Buxton. We've got Filigree, a comms partner who's been working with us, and during this year they will be helping us to work on these proposals and deliver them, and will be in place until certainly until the development partner is on board, and then would start their process for potentially then moving the project to the next stage in terms of actually developing designs, etc., for planning and that sort of more detailed design and planning process. So just a few words about the vision and the objectives and what the purpose really of the project is. So the key thing is that it would be shaped by town centre needs, and also that it would be championed by local people. So some of the elements or key principles, if you like, of the engagement strategy would be around ensuring that our community consultation and stakeholder engagement is clear, concise, open, and a two-way conversation, not just giving information, but actually listening and hearing the feedback that we get from the community. To be inclusive, planning for both, the breadth and diversity of consultation, so having an opportunity for all different sectors to be involved, and for all different communities to have an opportunity to have their say. To be able to take on board feedback and take an insight from that feedback to be able to shape the proposals. So really listening to what people say and trying to incorporate that within the proposals themselves. Communication to be timely and honest, and also to be able to articulate as part of the process what the benefits of the proposals will be to the town and to the local communities and businesses. In terms of audiences, we've got a number of key audiences highlighted here. So we've got the wider community, so people who live, work or visit Buxton, so who are very local to the town centre or who come and spend time there. There's also statutory consultees, so in part of this process we'd be looking at, we've obviously got Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities, who are a funder. Historic England, again, a key stakeholder due to the historic nature of the town. So those types of consultees, and then the wider stakeholders as well, so local representative groups and partnering organisations. And then the other category that we've got is seldom heard groups, and this is something that I'd be really keen to get feedback from the committee on this evening when we get to the end of the presentation around what categories of seldom heard groups or harder to reach groups would we need to consider. So people who maybe find it more difficult to engage, whether that's through disability, etc., in terms of accessing events or inability to engage for a variety of other reasons, whether that's mental health related, but also around groups, for example, town centre businesses, etc., and making sure that we've got opportunities for everybody to engage in the process, and maybe representatives who are a bit harder to engage with, and how we can best do that to get them on board, and what tools we can maybe use to do that. So that's definitely a topic for conversation, and when we get to the end, so we'll certainly come back to this slide and we'll be taking some notes from your feedback on this particular one. In terms of how we would measure success, there's a couple of slides that talk about the variety of different ways, but I think the key things that we're reaching out to people, looking at the local population and looking at who we would want to engage with, how we do that, whether it's through newsletters, social media, but obviously, again, encouraging attendance at physical consultation events as well, or online events if there are particular community groups who would prefer to engage through those platforms. Making sure there's opportunities for people to give feedback and for us to hear that feedback, and that it's a meaningful conversation and process, so that we're monitoring, who's attending, what the levels of engagement is, and being able to look at, how we then feed that information back to people, and making sure that we're really monitoring the ways that we're consulting, what's successful, and making sure that we're getting quality responses from people, and that it has a way of influencing as part of that, those conversations. Again, making sure that we are looking at the different communities that we want to contact and engage with, and also making sure that we monitor attendance through any of these events, whether it's virtual or in person, and also really considering the feedback that we get in developing that engagement, and whether we need to adapt our approach, particularly when it comes to the seldom heard groups, who are maybe less likely to engage, and really understanding whether we've managed to engage those groups, and how we then keep them engaged in the topic. It goes without saying that we need to be doing this in a clear, plain English, jargon-free conversations with people, and not complicating it with complex language and jargon that's difficult to understand, so that people can be actively participating in the process, and not alienated because of any technical nature of any conversations or acronyms and everything else. And I think the key thing it says on here is around really making sure that we adapt to any feedback that we get, monitoring the different channels that we will have. So we are looking at developing a website as well that will have a platform for information that people can find out what's happening. It will have key information, key messages on the project, and really evaluating as we go through that feedback. And also monitoring other social media on the Revitalising Buxton, and making sure that references to what we're doing in terms of that our communications are consistent, and that we challenge any misinformation, and also wanting obviously to engage, that we're getting honest reflection and feedback, that we're giving honest reflection of people's feedback as well, so that we're sharing the feedback that we get in an open and transparent way with our consultees and stakeholders and communities. So that's some of the how we'll do the activity. So there's different layers of involvement, as is always the case with projects of this nature. So the communication is often seen as a one-way, giving information, so sharing updates, explaining what we're doing, telling people why we've taken a particular decision, and then encouraging people to cascade that. So the communication's often us giving information out. When we move to engagement, it's more about asking for that feedback. So what we've talked about in terms of making sure that there's opportunities for people to comment and give opinions on proposals, to shape those proposals, and that there's opportunities for people to ask questions, etc. And then using that in that consultation process, so that people are really shaping proposals. So whether that is, people having an opportunity to come, say what they think about options and opportunities, and then that gets fed into the design process as it moves forward. So there's a real involvement in that. And then finally, that co-design. So it's that involvement is that local people have that opportunity as part of this ongoing conversation and engagement to see their ideas and their suggestions be reflected within the actual design proposals, so that there becomes a consensus around that feedback, and that this is what's been agreed collectively to put into those design proposals. So again, making sure that that cycle is continuous and throughout the project or opportunities, and for all of those types of engagement as we move forward, depending on the nature of the stakeholders and communities involved. So in terms of seldom heard groups, we've identified some areas, some potential target groups who are often deemed to be less likely to be heard. So one of those areas is tourists and visitors, just because of the transient nature of them, that they're not, they come and go, they're there for a short period of time. But again, it's important to understand some of their feedback and perspective. Children and young adults. So we've identified those as that kind of school, college age, so through that age range, and being able to engage with those around what does a town centre mean for them, what would attract them to the town centre, etc. What do they want to see in a town centre for their future? And then, as I mentioned before, people who may be more vulnerable and have disabilities, and how we'd engage with those, as well as, I think I mentioned earlier, how we engage with the local businesses in town as well. Again, maybe a sector that's less likely to engage, and how do we go out to reach them and give them opportunities to hear and be involved, although they may well be represented through some of the stakeholder panels that the stakeholder panel that we're setting up. So in terms of the timeline, we're at the start of 2024. We are currently looking at developing a website and content for that. And again, planning around the seldom heard groups to make sure that we don't miss any particular communities that are important in terms of that public consultation. And then later in the spring, launching that website, and also some engagement activities around a community newsletter, the stakeholder meetings. We are setting up, I think we talked last time about the stakeholder panel, and there was some slides about the different groups that would be represented. It may well be. Yes, it is on the next slide. And then later in the year, around the time of the festival, having more opportunities for those consultation events when we know that the town's more bustling, and have that opportunity to get that feedback from people. And then later in the year, into the beginning of next year, if we have the development partner on board, it would be that when they would start really thinking about how they then formulate actual design proposals and move that forward, and then take hold of the project through a planning process that would then again be much more about the design of the scheme and those kind of elements. So the stakeholder panel is an external consultative body of some key stakeholders with key interests in the town. Its purpose would be to provide guidance and advice that would support the project, and also to the project to deliver its outcomes, but also share expertise, insights from the local communities or particular groups that the stakeholder panel representatives would represent from across the Buxton area, and also to be able to review the project delivery and offer critical challenge, like critical friend kind of advice and input to enhance the project and bring additional value to the project. but also to be a champion for the project and to support that communication. So when I talked earlier about cascading messages and cascading information, using the stakeholder panel as representative groups of various different themes and sectors, that they would share that information through their networks as well, and make sure that we were getting the message out through those variety different business and community networks about the project and what the plans are and what's happening. And then in terms of the individual members of the panel, again, they'd be on the panel to share their expertise and knowledge. Again, we've identified the variety of different sectors that will be represented on the panel. They'd be attending meetings on probably a quarterly basis, I think is what we're looking at, or certainly 4 or 5 within the year. And then looking at, considering perspectives of other people representing their interest groups, whatever their sector they're representing, but also demonstrating leadership, so being proactive and contributing productively to conversations and seeking to achieve consensus on things and looking for solutions, and then again feeding in and reporting on progress, or identifying any issues that they have or they believe that their sector would have, and being able to proactively discuss those and try and seek resolution on any issues that they have. So in terms of representation and different themes or sectors that will be represented on the stakeholder panel, we've got town centre, environment, education, culture, arts and heritage, community representatives, political, accessibility, leisure and tourism, and transport. So those key themes and sectors that are important to successful, thriving town centres. And then item number 2, I think there's only just a couple of slides on this, and then we'll come back to the specific groups. But we're about to or just embark on a soft market testing, so going out to the development sector to seek their input, and this is the first phase really of engaging with the sector. It's an opportunity to get insight from developers around their interest in the project and how potential partners might approach the delivery of the site. So once we get that feedback, we'll collate that and consider it, and then we would move on to inviting more formal proposals from developers that would meet our requirements and looking for partners who align with our vision and values for the project and corporately. So we've developed a questionnaire that will go out to the development partners, and some of the key questions on there are really for us to gauge and understand, is it a right fit, their interest in the project, or is it, do they understand the town? So things like them giving examples of similar type projects or mixed use projects they've worked on, have completed or are delivering elsewhere. What's their level of interest in the project in terms of the size and scale of it, and how would it fit within their existing project pipeline? Their local knowledge and local supply chain, really important that any developer who works with us has a policy around use of local supply chain, so that the High Peak and businesses within the High Peak benefit from that spend, whether it's employment of trades, etc., whether it's purchasing of materials, that our local supply chain has the opportunity to really benefit from that in terms of that local economy and employment. And then understanding what type of team they would have with them, what the structure of that would be, what they provide in-house, what they subcontract, and how and where would they subcontract that. And also some feedback, seeking their views on the master plan and the council objectives. So that is the end of the presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions, but one of the areas that we really do want to go back to and have a conversation about in particular was this slide around the audiences, but particularly the seldom heard groups. So I think that was on this particular slide here about different groups, and it'd be great to get feedback on that specifically and any other general comments or feedback.
Thanks for the interesting presentation again, Lorraine. It's really selling the vision of we've not just bought a shopping centre, we've bought something that is going to be hopefully revitalising and redeveloping Buxton. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Payne, and then I'll go through the other names that are on the list. So I'll bring in Councillor Payne first, as he was fastest finger first, so to speak.
First of all, thanks for the presentation. Very concise, like the previous one. Just a couple of comments about hard to reach groups. So I think about the people who use that area today, and I observe a lot of people arriving by taxi or by bus. So I'm making an assumption here, because I tend to see the same people all the time. I don't live very far away from it, so I'm down there quite a lot. I think there's a lot of users of the area who live in Harper Hill and Fairfield who don't have cars and are always using public transport. And I think it'd be very good to actually get the views of those people, because they're the people who probably put the most effort into getting there. Now, I don't want to make too much of an assumption, but I am making a bit of an assumption that people who don't have cars tend to not have a lot of money. So but it's not always the truth, because sometimes it's people with disabilities. But again, you're picking up some of the harder to reach groups, and I'm not entirely certain that we picked those up last time we did one of these surveys. My second point is, I think we should also survey the other end of the spectrum, which is the people who come by car. And the 2 points is the people who currently use the council car park, but also the people who use the station car park. Personally, I'd rather not have a repeat of the last consultation, which had a picture of the station car park being turned into a garden. And that comes on to a third point about stakeholders. I am personally worried that the stakeholder groups that exist in this town today tend to be the same people and tend to come from a very specific socio-economic class. And some of them describe themselves as experts in particular areas. I'm not entirely certain they are. Now, I get the point. There isn't any real way that you can run a sort of consultative body without having people from the town team and Vision Buxton and all those great and good. But I do feel personally that they overrepresent themselves in the town. And then the last point I'm going to ask, and this is one more for the exec, I think. If we get to the point where we're finding it difficult to find a developer for what is probably a complex piece of regeneration, I'd like it borne in mind that the old ICI building, which was previously a hotel, almost stands alone in that complex and could be separated as a separate development that would show people that things were actually happening with a bit more pace. And I'm only saying that because there is a risk that over time we may find it very difficult to get a developer on board. And at that point, people in the town will start to say, well, when is something actually going to happen? Now, I don't know whether that's impossible because of the way that the funding comes through. But when you think about that building, it does stand alone. You're not going to add anything to it. You're not going to take anything away from it. You're not going to knock it down. it does cry out for an early intervention, and that might be part of the eventual project. But projects have a very high risk of slipping. You look at every project that governments run, local authorities run, they tend to run over and they tend to slip. So the ability to do something early has a great impact on the town. And that's it. I don't really need a response from that because the plan is the plan. I'm quite happy with the plan. But if we do stumble into trouble, I think we should consider a plan B. That's it.
Thank you. Don't know if anyone wants to comment on any of Councillor Payne's points before I bring
I would say taxi, bus, car, heard. I've some similar assumptions to yourself, and that's been factored in. I do think when we did the last public engagement, it did show disparities between what those that responded thought versus some of the stakeholder groups. And in terms of the developer, I would say the initial signs, obviously, until you go out, you don't ultimately know. But I think we'd say from informal requests for information or sort of in the sector, there does seem to be interest from multiple developers. So I don't think we'll be in that position. But again, we'd always look at what's the best option at the best time and try and follow up on.
Yeah, I'm not looking for a change in direction, Damien. I'm just looking for, if that happens, then, we will consider a plan B.
The whole point of the soft market testing is to see, before we actually formally ask for proposals, is to really test that. So if there is at this stage a lack of interest, then that's the point at which we take a change in tack, rather than going out and waiting for 8 weeks and then going, nobody's interested. And I think, as Damien said, we don't feel that is the position we'll be in, but this soft market testing is to help us shape that engagement so that we can make sure that we're making the most of that engagement with the sector and responding to some of those, as you said, that some of those deal breaker type things that they might have, and whether that is something that we want to consider or not. It's a two-way conversation again. It's about us assessing their fit to work with us and them doing pretty much the same thing. It's that opportunity really to get a feel for that fit at this early stage before we then start firming things up and asking for formal proposals, which then is a longer process.
No, that's fine, Lorraine. I'm just looking for some confirmation that is in mind, that if things do end up getting a bit sticky, there are some other options that we'd consider. So that's fine. And we're a scrutiny panel, so I am going to ask a couple of probing questions.
Yeah.
Chair, just on the stakeholder panel, just ensuring sort of we're hearing all the voices, both myself and the chief exec, along with Damien and Lorraine, we've done quite a bit of engagement to ensure that we're valuing all those voices. We've had some particular attention on some of the bigger groups in Buxton to make sure that they feel and are actively involved in it. But we're also wanting to make sure, particularly with the seldom heard groups, that we are making sure that we're hearing from everyone, and we'll have a good balancing job to do to make sure that we're balancing all those different voices as much as we can do, to just make sure that we're getting a clear view from the whole of the town as to what the future should be.
I think that's important, Anthony. So that's all I was looking for. That's fab.
Great, thanks, Councillor Payne. I'm going to bring in Councillor Sizeland.
Thanks. I've got some similar concerns to Councillor Payne. I'm not sure why we're having another consultation when we've already had a consultation, and that consultation very, very clearly said public loos were the priority for everybody in all groups. So accessible public loos in the middle of Spring Gardens. So I think we need to be cracking on with that. And I also, what Councillor Payne said about the ICI buildings, I think we need to be converting those to to flats or some sort of living accommodation. And I think that would get a lot more people on board with us about what's happening. Is there a timeline when all this has to be done?
So in terms of the whole project, I think, as we said previously, this is probably like a 5 to 10 year program, because there's lots of different elements. Some things might come quicker, but obviously we won't know specifics until we're in that place where we've got a means of development, and there will always, we're committed to, and there'll always be more consultation, because the up to now the consultation was on some proposals, and then we got some funding, not all the funding, and then we had to engage about we need to reprioritize because we got less money from the government. So there's always going to be stages, and when, as Lorraine said, when we get through this process and we have a development partner, it'll become more tangible. It'll be about what that specific space might become, or what things. So it's not the general stuff. It gets more as time goes on. It'll be more and more specific. In terms of the public toilets, there's a commitment to the roads. Again, it doesn't make sense to just spend money on toilets now if things might be changing because of the. So we need to know from developers what they would see as possible, and we got to choose as a council what the things that we definitely want, the things that we think, yes, the market knows exactly what it needs to build there, and factor those things in. And yeah, so timelines have become clearer, but it is a long-term project, hence why it's moved from just being about the grant, hence why we've got a long-term stakeholder panel in addition to everything else we're doing to get that feedback and make sure that people feel that this is happening for everybody and it's not being done on to people.
Well, I get the point about it not being happening for everybody. Of course we want it to happen for everybody, but I think we do need something tangible to happen. And, you know, we've got another consultation, and I'm concerned that we're going to keep spending money to bringing firms in, spending money on this, that we're not going to have the money to spend on actually tangible things, if you see what I mean.
So in terms of the money we've received, the majority of that has been gaining the asset. And in terms of that, we've bought an asset that's worth, we've had money from government and we bought an asset that's worth and provides an income to the council now. Everything thereafter will be a mixture of the council borrowing to order and what developers private enterprise will bring. So it's not a case of everything that we're doing now is all part of what happens in these big infrastructure programs to deliver those very big change over a big area with it's multi-million pounds. So it's a lot of, obviously a lot of money to buy the space, but if this is done right, the whole program might be sort of a £40 million thing. It's a lot, it's a big thing. So it's not that we've already delivered the space. We are looking at other changes, but again, it was never going to be a short-term thing, and I know that that's frustrating, and that's why there's this strategy to engage people, to inform people about where we're up to, the newsletter. Right, the next thing is this. We're going to have some plans to show you at this time. That's the idea of that engagement, to keep people on, because I know people are frustrated and want to see change, but it was never realistic that suddenly we have a magic wand to put things into place. But we've got really solid process. We've got making sure everything we do is solid ground in terms of the building, the due diligence when we bought the place, the planned next step. So that's what we're doing to assure you as members, but also the public and those stakeholders that all want to see these things happen.
I still don't see why we can't have some toilets in one of those units.
We can. It's just a case of when and the timing. But Anthony might want to say something.
We need to be doing it. I'm sorry, but we need to be doing it.
Chair, I think it's just important to remind some members on the call, we didn't buy the centre because we wanted to run a shopping centre. We bought the whole of the area. It's not a one-trick pony. You know, if we just wanted to put toilets in the town centre, then there would have been cheaper ways of doing it. We bought this because we wanted to redevelop that whole part of the town to make sure it's fit for the future. And just in terms of sort of making sure that we're meeting the targets that we had associated with the funding. Those are all up to date, and we're in line in terms of our reporting for that. And we're obviously making sure that we'll not only meet the targets that we agreed to in terms of getting that funding, we will exceed them. But as I'm sure most people will appreciate, it's not an overnight thing to get this done. It will take a bit of time. And the reason for that extra consultation is to make sure that we're making those right decisions, and we're not just trying as we were in the initial consultation, which was to get a plan to get the funding.
Yeah, I get all that, but I still think we need to see something tangible. Toilets and, like Chris says, the ICI buildings as well. Anyway, I've said what I feel about it. Thank you.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Scott now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick point about seldom heard groups. Councillor Collins mentioned earlier in the discussion about the tourism strategy that we're having more visitors from different ethnic groups. So it's important that they're consulted about, different ethnicities, different faith groups, whether their needs are being catered for, whether they're feeling welcome, and if there's more that can be done for them. So that's it, just that point. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone want to come back with the point, or should I just bring in Councillor Hacking now?
Yeah, hear that.
I'll bring in Councillor Hacking now. Thank you.
Hello. I was just going to thank the officers for their acknowledging that we need more information on the website, updating that, making it more accessible. And I just wanted to build on the points Chris Payne and Kath Sidens have made about the frustration and the lack of seeing what's being done. And I think part of the solution is to maybe be a bit more vocal about the process itself and how long it's going to take, so that people know that it's not going to be an overnight thing, and where we are do it in it and how they can get involved. And in terms of the Swindon Hurt groups, I just wanted to say that sometimes people might have a view, but they might not necessarily have the confidence to turn up to a consultation or commit long term. So then I think there needs to be a way that people can maybe give their opinions to a third party who will then communicate that on their behalf. I mean, I know that's what councillors are supposed to be for, but even approaching a councillor can be a big barrier to some people, because we can be intimidating, or they might just feel more comfortable just talking to someone they already know. And I was just wondering whether residents' associations might be better, a better avenue, or maybe like parent or teacher associations or school councils, or places that are already gathering information, talking on behalf of their people, the communities, and just whether they could act on behalf of those London groups, really reach out to them.
I think you're exactly right. I think that taking in reverse order, that those sort of suggestions is what we're looking for. I know in terms of engaging younger people, schools has been flagged, but I think if you're the ones you've already mentioned, if there's any others, just even specific, if it's you said housing association, if it's a support group, if it's that is exactly what we're after, so we can make sure that people who find it more difficult to share the views in the more not traditional ways, that we can still make sure we're getting that, because we're never going to be able to represent everyone as councillors, and we're never going to be able to have every single view in a stakeholder forum, but we want to make sure they're taken into account. And in terms of the other stuff, yeah, I think thanks for the views about the accessibility, heard the stuff about the communication about timescales. Thank you.
Chair, just on in terms of some of the consultation methods, the council's doing some particular work around the strategy that went through committee during last year. And we're also sort of making sure that in terms of both the website and in terms of sort of any consultation software that we've got available, we've been able to sort of update that equipment to be able to sort of give us a wider range of options in terms of how we use that, so that hopefully we can try and get as many different voices sort of heard as possible through the consultation. But if anyone does feel that we're sort of missing anyone out potentially, please do feed them through to officers, and we'll look at how we can make sure they're engaged.
I think the key thing on the seldom heard groups is that we're acknowledging that we needed to take a different approach, and that they won't necessarily come to us, we might need to go to them, and how do we do that? So it's about identifying, and as Councillor Hacking had said, maybe those ideas about what groups and what where we can go to engage those harder to reach and seldom heard groups, because it's our responsibility to give them an opportunity to have a say and to be involved. So I think that's why we've framed it in that way. So it's really helpful to get this type of feedback, so we can look at those different opportunities.
You're muted, Chair.
Sorry, I'm going to bring in Councillor Quinn now, please.
Hi, yeah, just a point. I mean, a lot of these groups who were consulting, we've got a pretty good idea of what they want because people have been consulted. So if we take, for example, young people in Buxton, we know that they need, or they want somewhere to go. They want a kind of social area. We've talked to police who brought in comments about other areas when we talked about Fairfield Road, about wanting a space. And we know that people want toilets, although we have got toilets, but we do need signposting, but we could do with some more. There is a danger with this constant asking people and then nothing happening, that people do become very turned off from the process, because they'll think, well, you asked me that 4 years ago, you asked me that 3 years ago, you asked me that 2 years ago, and now you're asking me again, and I actually don't believe you're going to do any of it. So I do think that we do need to get a move on with something. If we're not going to knock the centre down, if it's still going to be there, surely there are phases of development that we can bring in so people can actually be enthused by seeing that there is change. I mean, points have been made about various areas that could be developed, but surely there is some change that we could bring in that will enthuse people and make them feel there actually is something happening.
I think take the point in terms of constant asking, nothing happening, but I would say the real key point is this soft market testing to understand what developers can think is possible with the space that we have within the confines that we've said as a council we want to do in terms of the arrangements between us and a developer. That's the point where it's going to be, and then the programme and project would probably be phased, so it would become, there'll be things that could be done quicker, there are things that we want to do to fulfil funding, etc., like upper floor, bringing them back into use. So I think that is exactly how it will happen. It's just we've got to get over this bit now, which is soft market testing, find out what's available, we craft about exactly what we want, then we go and get the developer, have that agreement, and after that it's a very dynamic thing that we can do with that developer about phasing what happens first. They might have a view as to what they would like to. We have a view about the things that we think the public would like to see first. So we need to get over this initial bit, which I know is longer than people would like, but unfortunately these are very difficult matters, and we can't just rush into them. I think Neil's a director wants to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely, and I do understand. I think we do understand the desire to see change. But as Dame was saying, how complex this process is. We're talking about 30-40 million pounds development over a long period, and that's going to be difficult for people to understand. So part of the consultation strategy this year will be about taking people on the journey with us, so that we're completely transparent about where we are, what we're doing next, and how we're listening to people, and how we can reflect those views in what we're doing. So I think there's a bit of an education process for us all about how we do that. But the idea is that through the different approaches we're going to take with all the different groups, the stakeholder panel, the newsletter, is that we bring people along with us for the journey.
Great, thanks Neil. Has anyone got any other comments they want to make on the presentation? Again, I think really lively debate, really good.
It was just to come back to a comment that Councillor Hacking put in the comments written, just to say that is as part of the comms engagement strategy. That is part of it. Having a website to keep people up. This is where we're up to. This is the staging. This is what's happening next. Physical things in the shops, that space that we own, the space on the high street, within the notice board. So that is planned to do that. But obviously we need to know exactly. At the minute we're saying we're in the process of finding this more, but as time goes on, it's going to be really specific. Then it's going to be this date, this year, this season, this is what's going to happen type of thing. So that we're setting up the groundwork for that. We're on the cusp of that, basically.
Great, thanks for that. Councillor agree now. Okay, so if everyone's happy, I'm going to bring the debate to a close, and we're going to move on to the next agenda item. So agenda item number 8, do we have any questions referred to the executive member? I'm assuming we don't, so I've not seen any.
No, Chair.
And can we to exclude the press and public? So Rachel, will you let us know when the recording is ended so we can go into the part 2?